We are in Flight Sim 2020, and this is the first thing you will see when you actually open up the simulator, the first page. Then you go into here and you select your departure, which is going to be Jersey, EGJJ. And now we're going to select a parking spot. And we've selected a parking spot at the Jersey Flying Club, which is just there. You can see it right now, a little dot. So now we're going to be opening up ready to fly, and if we press on ready to fly, it'll take us to the aircraft on the parking spot, and there we are, we're parked up there. Now I'm opening up Little Nav Map, and Little Nav Map is a free moving map which you can just download, and it's a really useful little tool for Flight Simulator. And there's Little Nav Map, and you'll see the little yellow symbol right in the middle of the screen there. That's our aircraft parked at Jersey Airport. The green line coming out from runway 26 is the ILS, Instrument Landing System, which we'll be actually intercepting when we come round on the circuit and come back in again. This is Navigraph, and I've set this onto Jersey Airport, and it'll help us with the taxi. You can see that little arrow down, the pink arrow over on the right hand side. That's our aircraft position at the moment. And as I say, this is Navigraph, very useful. There we are, back to Little Nav Map. Zooming in. There's Jersey, the island. The button you see down there on the left hand side, that's the avionics master switch, by the way. And we need to switch that off before we start the engines, because if you leave it on, if you leave the avionics on, when you turn off the engine, it could actually damage the avionics with a power surge. You can see now that the avionics have been switched off. You can see there the brakes are on down the middle there. They're in the on position. Parking brakes. Now we're going to set up the Garmin, which is the new Garmin GNS 430/530, and this is available from working title on the marketplace, the MSFS marketplace, and it's a free download. What we're doing here is we're waiting for acquisition of satellite. Satellites are being acquired now. You can see them actually logging in. There we are. We'll enter that. We want to enter select approach, select the ILS 26, enter that, and select JSY1 and enter that. Activate, and then press yes here, and you'll see that the frequency has gone to 110.30, which is the ILS frequency for runway 26. You see that on the left hand side at the top there in the blue. That's the flight plan, basically map on the GPS. Down on that heading indicator down on the bottom right hand side, there's a heading bug. You'll see that moving soon. We're going to set that on the actual runway heading, which is 26. See it moving up to the top there? Now we're on 26. Now we're going to set the HSI, which is the needle pointing over to the left, onto the same heading for when we actually intercept the ILS. So that will be on the same heading. See that needle turning around now to 26. Done. The next thing we'll do is to set the altimeter. So we'll set that on 0 So that will be the actual QFE of the airport, because you want it on 0 of ground level. So that will be happening any second now. There we are. And that, you see at the top there, it's moving up to 0. There we are. Do start the engine. We open the window and shout clear prop to make sure no one's standing by when the prop starts turning. Anyone standing near to the prop could be injured as it turns over. Clear prop. Oh, the engine's now started. You check that the oil pressure is in the green. Now we're going to taxi out slightly and check the brakes are working, because what you don't want to find is on the taxiing the brakes suddenly fail or they're not working, so you check the brakes first. Again, check that everything's in order, check that the into wind, basically, for when we can carry out the actual engine checks. Gear is down, the brakes are on at the moment. The mixture is rich, that's the red knob. The prop is blue, that's the blue knob, all the way in. Before we do begin our taxi, you need to ensure the actual taxi lights are on, so people know that you're there and you're taxiing. So that's one thing to check. For the magneto check, you actually want to increase the RPM to 1700 RPM. There we go. So we're checking the left magneto and making sure that the RPM drop does not exceed 150 RPM. Then we go back to both. And now we check the right magneto and check the RPM doesn't drop below 150 RPM. Pull out the carb heat, turn it on, in other words, to make sure there's a small drop, but only a small drop in the RPM, and then put it back in again. With both magnetos on now, the difference should not be a drop to exceeding 75 RPM. Move the prop control full aft, then fully forward. Observe the drop in RPM and rise in manifold pressure. Repeat 2 or 3 times to circulate oil into the prop hub. It's very important to check your magnetos for the engine run-up. You're confirming that both the magnetos are actually working, and it checks for excessive drops, which could mean fouled plugs, bad timing, or other ignition problems or issues. So always check the difference between the magnetos. A light aircraft are essential components of the ignition system. They generate the electrical spark needed to ignite the fuel air mixture in the engine cylinders. I'm assuming here that we have taxi to the hold for runway 26. We're now beginning our taxi up to runway 26. Always just use your rudder pedals to try a turn to the left and a turn to the right to make sure the rudder pedals are working correctly and that you are turning left and right. Also here you can put down one stage of flaps. At this holding point we would ask for permission for departure. At this point, just look to the right again and look to the left to make sure there's no other traffic, especially any traffic on finals that's coming into land. ATC will give you permission to line up at runway 26 and wait. Check carb heat is off, but do not take off until they've given you permission to actually take off. You must be given takeoff clearance before you proceed. Double check here that all the lights are on, beacon, navigation lights, etc. Pitot heat, try that, and make sure that the mixture is fully rich for takeoff. If you haven't done so already, you can put down one stage of flaps here. We'll now apply full power, and we start our rotation at about 50 knots. And we'll climb away at between 70 and 80 knots in the runway direction, which is 26. After takeoff checks, we check the brakes are released and they're not dragging, so put our feet on the toe brakes and just check those. We'll check the gear is up. We'll retract the flaps if they've been used for takeoff, which they have. We'll set the climb power to about 25 inches, manifold pressure 2,500 RPM. If you're above 3,000 feet, you just lean out slightly for smooth running and watch the EGT. Fuel pump off if you used it for takeoff. Check the instruments, the engine instruments are in the green, all the pressures are in the green, etc. You can turn off taxi lights above 1,000 feet. Leave beacon and nav lights on. Just trim for hands-off climb. Check and set the direction indicator, the altimeter, that the VSI is working, the vertical speed indicator, and climb speed about 90 to 100 knots. Down on the left hand side you'll see where the Corbière lighthouse is, which is where I'd normally make my turn towards. We're making a turn now to the through 90 degrees left, which is the crosswind leg. I always set my heading bug to the actual next heading that I need to take, so I'm watching when it turns onto that heading bug. Heading bug can be very, very useful. We actually climbed a bit higher than we should, so I'm losing altitude now because the actual circuit height is 1,000 feet. And we're still on the crosswind leg, and we'll shortly be turning onto the downwind leg. And a good rule of thumb is to keep the airport to about a wingspan away. That's external view. You notice on the actual airspeed indicator we're flying quite above the speed we need to be, so we're going to be losing speed soon as well. We're now turning downwind, and on the downwind leg we will do our bump fitch checks. So we check the brakes have pressure, feet clear from resting on them, so we're not pressing the brakes all the time. The undercarriage will now be down. On downwind you usually keep it up until base or final to avoid drag, but confirm you know when you'll lower it. Well, we'll lower it for the downwind anyway. Make sure the actual mixture is fully rich, the propeller is fully fine, and we have the fuel selected on both, or the fullest tank, and the fuel pump on if applicable. We'll check the engine instruments, the gauges, the suction, the ammeter, the altimeter set to the local QFE, Check the direction indicator aligned with the compass, and carb will apply for a little bit at a time and then put it back in again, because we want to make sure the carb heat is off for when we actually are on the final approach. Make sure the doors and windows are secure, seat belts, harnesses are fastened, and your seat, very important, this is secure, because once it actually slipped forward, I think I said this before actually earlier on. We're now on the downwind leg. Little nav map. So why do we fly circuits when training for the PPL? Well, circuits are all about practicing takeoffs, landings, and that all-important go-around. It's a structured way to build muscle memory, confidence, and precision in the traffic pattern. You get to work on radio calls, managing power and flaps, trimming and handling the aircraft in every phase of flight, all in a tight loop around the airfield. It's not glamorous cross-country stuff, but it's the foundation of a safe flying. Every good pilot was once a student doing laps of the circuit. We also do a takeoff without flaps, with flaps, short field takeoff. We do an emergency engine failure on takeoff, where we apply the brakes and stop the aircraft if the engines failed as a practice. Then we do, for the landings, we do normal powered landing, a powered off landing, glide approach. We do a flapless landing, a landing with flaps. We do all kinds of different landings and takeoffs, so, all for practice. Don't worry about what you're doing, just do what your instructor tells you to do what it tells you in the textbooks, and just get on with it and do it by the book, and you'll be absolutely fine. And there's nothing to worry about. It's a lot of fun. You will enjoy it. Familiarise yourself with the controls, with the instruments, and get familiar with the aircraft as much as you possibly can before you take the first few lessons. Just wander around the aircraft, look inside, look at all the controls, look at all the instruments, find out what they all do, what they all are, and you'll be absolutely good to go. Read about each exercise and each lesson before you do it, and talk it through with the instructor before you go to fly the exercise, and just get yourself a good grounding of what you're going to be doing next, and that will put you in good stead. We're now going to make a turn through about 100 degrees, because I want to be able to intercept the ILS, the instrument landing system, the localizer, by about 10, 15, 20 degrees. Here we are back on a little nav map, and you can see we are heading towards the tip of the island. We're now flying towards the actual ILS system. We're on the base leg now, so we're checking the gear is down, call out, gear down, and well, 3 greens it would be on an airliner, but 1 green on this. This is the Cessna 182. Extend flaps to the next stage, often 20 degrees on base. Maintain target speed of about 80-85 knots. Mixture on full rich, propeller on full fine, Fuel selector on both and fullest tank. Electrical pump will now go on. Landing lights will now be on. Check the instruments fee. Confirm on correct base altitude and spacing. Confirm final approach course clear. So make sure there's no traffic out there. Have a good look around. That's good airmanship. Make sure your belts are fastened and snug. You keep scanning for traffic, especially on the base leg, to make sure there's nobody coming in already on finals. We're still heading towards the ILS instrument landing system approach, and fairly soon we'll be intercepting that, and we'll be turning in towards the left. Your radio call here will be something like intercepted the ILS on finals to land, for full stop if you're going to be doing a full stop landing, or for a touch and go if that's what you want to do, a touch and go. And they will give you permission to land. Check the instruments that are all in the green and reading correctly. Check the QFE is reading correctly. Yeah, the needle's started to move, so we're now intercepting the instrument landing system, the ILS. We're on the ILS approach, more or less. You can see the runway is dead ahead of us now, more or less. We're checking that the gear is down, the brakes are off, the mixture is fully rich. We have the flaps set. We have good speed. And by the way, you only set the flaps when you're in the green arc on the actual speed indicator, airspeed indicator. Because if you set the flaps before you're in the green part of the airspeed indicator, you could damage them by setting them at too high a speed. Now we're intercepting the glide slope. You can see that the aircraft is descending. At about 500 feet per minute. That's St. One's Bay over there. And you should be listening out to air traffic now, because you want to make sure there's nobody on the runway or taxiing out. You want to know where people are. There we are. We're descending at 500 feet a minute still. We're on a good approach. One instructor I had at Jersey Airport when I was doing my PPL was a guy called Jeff Tipping, and what he taught me on landing, what you would do is, as you came down to the roundabout, more or less here, you'd pull back on the yoke and keep saying, I'm not going to let you, 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 while you're gently pulling back on the yoke. What you're doing, you're keeping the main front wheel off the ground, because that's where all the weight is with the engine, and you're keeping that nose wheel off the ground to stop any damage from the weight coming down too quickly. So he teach me, not going to let you, not going to let you, not going to let you. You just keep pulling the yoke back gently until it just settles down. I'm now turning all the way around to backtrack the runway to exit. You would actually have to make sure you got permission from ATC for this, air traffic control. Otherwise, you might actually to taxi all the way down to the end of the runway and taxi from that end of the runway back up again. But I'm just, for my convenience, I'm just turning all the way around for a backtrack, and I'm exiting right here to go back to the flying club. When you've taxied off the runway, put the flaps up, because you don't want the flaps being damaged by any stones flying up through from the ground. I would normally have stopped there to make sure nobody's on the right hand side taxiing up. Anyway, we're clear. And here we are back at the flying club. We'll park up by the side of this Cessna. We'll put the brakes on. We'll pull the mixture all the way back. And we'll turn off the magnetos, the ignition. And that will stop the engine. Here we are back at Jersey Airport, landed safely. I hope you've enjoyed flying with me, and I'll continue doing my videos and hopefully get better and better as time goes by. Thank you for your patience. Bye bye.